My name's Sharon Kallos, and I'm a registered nutritionist. I also work out of Diana's practice at Physio on the River. But at the moment, with the lockdown and everything else, I'm mostly doing consultations via Zoom or FaceTime or just general phone calls. Because it's one thing that I can do, whereas Diana's things can be a little bit more hands-on. I don't have to be so hands-on. I can do things over Zoom. So it makes it really convenient. It doesn't matter then where you're geographically placed. You can easily get contact with me via Zoom. So I'd like to share with you some of the nutritional aspects of aging well. And it kind of complements Diana's talk about how you've got to protect those muscles to help prevent frailty as you get older. So I will share my presentation with you. Okay, so I'm going to start with nutrition and the older adults. So if we look at aging well, as we age, our eating behaviors, they change, and your appetites along with that can change, and often they can decrease. So because your appetite is much smaller or can be much smaller, it's essential that you get those key nutrients within that decreased appetite in order to maintain that health and function of an older adult. So I want to look at the issues that can appear as you age, but also then try and consider what we can do to prevent them or to maintain wellness throughout. So as Diana mentioned, there is that progressive loss of skeletal muscle, often known as sarcopenia. And our metabolism is very much linked to the amount of lean body mass that we have and the increase in fat. So it may not be that for some people that you gain lots of weight, but the ratios of lean muscle mass to fat changes. And so you lose some of the muscle mass and you gain the fat mass. Along with that, that leads to the loss of bone density. And a lot of that is tied up with the poor absorption of those nutrients from food. There's also, as you get older, you are more inclined to have some kind of inflammatory condition. And that can be associated with either a chronic or acute diseases that commonly occur with age. And that can be anything from diabetes to atherosclerosis. So anything that causes inflammation in the body can have an impact on protein absorption in the body and other nutrients. But also along that, with that, you sometimes get a reduction in the ability to sense when you're hungry or thirsty. And thirst is very important. You have to make sure that you're hydrated at all times. So if we look at why we consider this loss of muscle mass and bone density to be an issue. So as Diana mentioned, as we age, we lose muscle mass. And you start losing some of that from a nutritional point of view from about the age of 30. So for each decade, you consider that to be 3 to 8% of your muscle mass. But what I want to stress here is that we're all individuals. So we all have different strengths and weaknesses. And although these are the things that happen generally, some may lose muscle mass more quickly than others. And this loss of muscle mass is one of the major causes of weakness leading to frailty and poor health in the elderly. And it's often a vicious cycle of if you become inactive, you lose muscle. The more you become inactive, the more muscle you lose. So it has that vicious cycle and it's trying to break. And as Diana said, catch that early to make sure that the loss isn't too much. And the frailty is often characterized by that cumulative decline in things that we notice that make somebody a little bit more vulnerable. And as Diana said, as far as muscle's concerned, the term use it or lose it very much applies here. we also find that from a nutritional point of view and calorie intake, daily calorie intake is very much determined by muscle mass and your activity level, because it changes your metabolic rate, and the more active you are, the more you can eat. And we very much want to make sure that people are eating enough to be able to consume the right amount of nutrients. So what can you do to maintain that? The thing that helps muscle, as well as the resistance, the muscle training, the gym, walking, is actually eating enough protein. So it's not just gym bunnies that need it. As you get older, you actually need more muscle, more protein to maintain or regain some of that muscle. And that's also because sometimes with those inflammatory conditions that you have, your body needs more protein to actually repair things that are not working very well. They need it because your body doesn't absorb it as well as it used to. So when we look at how much protein you get, we would like to look at working out when we look at the body weight of somebody. So as a nutritionist, I would not have, it's not a one size fits all. You've got to make it appropriate to the person that you're considering. But this is, you can definitely get a benefit from getting more protein. And if you have protein, you can then do more resistance work, you can do more exercise, and that's how best to make that protein help to regain that muscle. And if we look at what that means in practice, say we take somebody, so we talked about this 1 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Now you get protein from all sorts of sources. It doesn't have to be meat. It can be fish, it can be eggs, it can be pulses. So the wider variety that you get your protein from, the better. A varied diet is what we're looking for. So for instance, if you have an adult weighing about 80 kilos, we'd like to see them consume somewhere in the region of 80 to 96 grams of protein. If you're talking about, a smaller person, say a woman who is 60 grams, we'd work that out the same way, and that she would need somewhere in the region of 60 to 72 grams of protein a day. But the key thing to this is spreading your protein throughout the day. Don't rely on just your evening meal, because the body can only absorb so much of protein in one meal. And I find that with a lot of my clients, in that their daily consumption of food is very light during the day of protein, very light, particularly at breakfast time, that most of their protein is consumed in their evening meal, whether it's a piece of chicken or fish. Whereas actually you must take advantage in whatever meal or snack that you're having to make sure that you're getting protein into that. So I'd like to see that protein of the sort of 80 to 96 grams of protein, if we're talking about an 80 kilogram adult, of being spread from making sure you get enough at breakfast time, a little mid-morning snack, and lunch. So it's spread throughout the day, so that it gives you a little bit more chance to absorb it, and then you're moving around. Because if you eat most of your protein at the last meal in the evening, then you're more likely to be less movement, you'll go to bed, and the protein doesn't have the chance of working its way through the body to be used to create new muscles. And there are lots of ways that you can increase your protein intake by having things like milky puddings or drinks or yogurts. There's just ways of adding it in to the day. So if we look at one of the things that I find I need to change most with clients is looking at what they're eating for breakfast. Quite often they'll just have a piece of toast and a cup of tea. Now, you will get protein in bread, and you do get some if you're having milk in your tea, but there are ways of improving the amount of protein. Now, smoked salmon and cream cheese bagel, you can get as much as 24, 25 grams of protein. Or peanut butter. Now, not everybody will have the same tastes or appetites. So I've gone from toast to porridge, eggs on toast. And if you look at these, you can see how you can build extra amount of protein into your breakfast. Porridge is always a good one, particularly through the winter. And then you can add nuts to that, or you can even add peanut butter, because as long as you get the peanut butter that's just pure peanuts and it's not got lots of oils or sugar added to it, it's a very healthy substitute and a very healthy way of getting protein into your meals. And it may be that you only have this kind of breakfast at a weekend, you have something quicker, but a quick and easy breakfast is also Greek yogurt. Greek yogurt has more protein in it than just an ordinary yogurt. And you can add fruit to that. Or if you have difficulties chewing and difficulties eating a solid meal, then smoothies are another great way of getting protein into you, because you can put yogurt in, fruits and nuts. And so it's important that you find a way of getting that extra nutrition into you, even though that your energy demands, you might be on a smaller portion sizes. Now, that protein is all about helping build muscle. But along with that, one of the biggest ways of improving your health is your gut microbiome. I see a lot of clients who have issues with disordered stomach problems, whether it be constipation or irritable bowel syndrome. And I often find that as you get older, your gut microbiome changes. So as well as extracting energy from your food, your gut is where most of your immune system is. So this is where we build our hormones, our vitamins, our enzymes that help boost your immune system and keep you healthier. So it influences everything from our appetite to our mood, because there's this gut-brain axis, which I'm not sure if everybody will have heard of, but it's how we transmit signals in our body. So the gut microbiome has got so many trillions of microorganisms, from good bacteria, but there are also viruses and funguses in there, and they all have their own job to do. And they're a bit like you have so many different types of antibiotics, there are so many different types of bacteria that each have a different function. The issue is, as you age, your gut microbiome changes. So by the time someone reaches the age of about 60 years, their gut microbiome has been altered. And it's been altered due to all sorts of things, whether it's from taking antibiotics, the environment, the food that you eat. But in general, what happens is the diversity of the numbers of different bacteria in your gut becomes much less diverse. The good ones that you may have heard about from yogurts and advertising for live yogurts are the lactobacillus and the bifidobacteria, which play a great role of shaping your immune system. They begin to lose ground, and you have the less friendly bacteria beginning to take place. So when you have this change in your gut bacteria, you find a lot of problems becoming associated with that. It becomes more difficult to absorb those important nutrients. And this is often what I see, unintended consequences. People were okay until they started taking some new medication that's had an impact on them. And that might be anything from antibiotics to other prescribed medications, or something that they might have like arthritis or diabetes. And often we have low stomach acid as we get older. And these things often lead to constipation. And this becomes a vicious cycle, because people then start taking laxatives to help with the constipation. The laxatives make your bowel become a little lazy, and so you need more laxatives for it to work. So it becomes another cycle of reducing the effectiveness of your gut. So a well-functioning gut has lots of benefits. So it has that improved gut motility, so you're less likely to have problems with IBS or with constipation. It helps protect against pathogens that you may come across in your daily life, whether that be viruses or just opportunistic bacteria that may be around. It supports your immune function. It regulates the absorption of all those good nutrients from your food. And it supports blood glucose levels and different energy metabolism, and helps with the reduction in functional and inflammatory disorders from things like arthritis or diabetes or cardiovascular disease. So, what can we do to help improve that and keep your gut microbiome healthy? One of the best ways you can do is to feed your gut. So the standard that the NHS and Public Health England would like people to be eating is aiming for 30 grams of fiber a day, because the gut microbiota love fiber. That's where they get their energy from. All that indigestible fiber that you have when you're eating different vegetables and fruit and nuts is what feeds that gut microbiota. So this little picture here, I always like to tell my clients to eat the rainbow. So the more colors you have in your diet, it looks more appealing, but you're getting a much wider range of lots of things like antioxidants and polyphenols, which are great for your health. So try and have as many of the whole grains that you have. Try and things like wholemeal pasta and bread and brown rice and oats. So porridge is a great way to start your day. Also, lots of nuts and seeds and lentils and fruit. Everything from apples, raspberries, lots of dark colored fruits, and vegetables the same. So eat as many different colors as possible, and that will help feed your gut microbiota. Now, if you don't eat anywhere near that 30 grams of fiber a day, I would recommend you try and increase it slowly. So this thing about eating 5 a day of fruit and vegetables is great. But we should really even try and eat more than that. But if you don't try and eat 7 types of vegetables in one day if you haven't been eating that, because you will find that your stomach will find that a little bit windy and a little bit of stomach cramping. So we like to increase the amount of fruit and vegetables you eat on a slow basis until your gut bacteria adjusts to the amount of fiber that it's having. The other things that you may have come across are fermented foods. Now, these are great because not only do they include lots of good bacteria, but they also are other sources of beneficial enzymes which help digest food, B vitamins, and omega-3 fatty acids. Now, we're probably all familiar with the bio live yogurts. You see it in the supermarkets with, live yogurt, live bacteria in it. This is a little bit different. This is a little bit of a wider range of bacteria kefir, and that can be used in smoothies or just put it on cereals, and that's a really good way of getting lots of different good bacteria in. But the more unusual probably is the miso and kimchi, and the kimchi is more like an Asian version of the sauerkraut, a little bit spicier, but they've got lots of good fiber in there. And if you add them to your daily intake of food, whether it's just the yogurt or miso soup is a lovely way of just getting a little bit of warmth into you in the winter. They're really good for your gut bacteria. And as I mentioned about looking at some of the key nutrients, that we find that it's more difficult for older people to absorb more of these good nutrients. I mentioned the enzymes and the B vitamins. So if you look at some of the other key nutrients that are really important as you age, and the calcium is particularly important for bones. As we get older, we can be more prone to things like osteoporosis, where the bones become more fragile, and we need to make sure that there's enough calcium in the diet. Vitamin D and vitamin B12. So I'm going to look at each one of those individually. So if we look at calcium, It's important not just for bones, but it's also important for muscles and the nerves and helps prevent osteoporosis. Now, in the UK, we say adults over the age of 50 require at least 700 milligrams of calcium a day. And by eating about 3 to 4 portions of dairy products a day, you should get enough calcium. But if we look at newer studies, the recommendation is actually changing to increase that to more likely to be about 1,000 milligrams of calcium a day. And calcium doesn't just come in the shape of milk, cheese, and dairy products. You do find them in other things like leafy vegetables, but it's not as readily absorbed as it is in dairy products. But it may be that you have an intolerance, you might be lactose intolerant and can't have milk or cheese or dairy, in which case you might be having plant alternatives or soya. Make sure that those kind of plant-based milks have added calcium, because their soya is probably the closest you would get to being similar to dairy milk. But the almond milks and other sorts of plant-based milks don't have anywhere near the amount of nutritional value as dairy unless they're fortified. So make sure that when you look at your plant-based milks, that they are fortified with calcium and various other vitamins that they often are. But you can also get calcium from tinned salmon or sardines, where you actually consume the little bones. They don't cause problems as it would be in a big fillet of cod or something, but you get calcium from the bones that are in there. But in order to absorb that calcium, it's important that you have good levels of vitamin D. So vitamin D is essential for good bone health because it regulates that absorption of calcium and phosphorus. But it also plays an important role in immunity, upper respiratory tract infections, and also neurological conditions. So it's thought that, when we see somebody that has low calcium levels, it's actually usually because they have low vitamin D, not because they're not consuming enough calcium. It's because they don't have enough vitamin D in order to absorb the amount of calcium. And vitamin D we mainly get from the action of UV light from the sun on our skin. It's also found in small amounts of food, but not enough to be able to keep our levels of vitamin D where we need them to be. So particularly for those people who may spend a lot of time indoors, or who have darker skin tones because it's more difficult to absorb UV light, it's important that you take a daily vitamin D supplement. So for the majority of people, I would say you absolutely must take a vitamin D supplement from around October through to April, because the UV sunlight that we get, particularly in the northern climes of Europe, is not enough. But if you're someone who doesn't venture out very much, who doesn't get very much sunlight even in the summer, it's important that you actually take a vitamin D supplement all year round. If we look at the other important nutrient, it's vitamin B12. So it's essential for making blood cells, maintaining healthy brain function, and plays a role in energy production. It's a water-soluble vitamin, so we need to eat it all the time because it's not stored in our body. It will be washed out. There are lots of food that vitamin B12 is found in, from eggs, chicken, meat. So there are lots of sources, but you will, if you don't have enough vitamin D, there are types of anemia that you'll find. The issue with the vitamin B12 as you get older is having enough stomach acid to separate it from the protein in the food. So this is one of the things I was talking about, unintended consequences of medication. So as you get older, you tend to have less stomach acid anyway, but medications such as metformin, which some people will be taking for diabetes, or the proton pump inhibitors for some people who feel if they have acid reflux. It actually then lowers the amount of acid in your stomach, which then makes it harder for you to absorb vitamin B12. So older people may benefit from eating things that are fortified with B12, but also it may be worth considering a supplement if you don't think your diet is particularly well, or if you're taking medication that may inhibit that absorption. And it's worth chatting with your doctor. You may find that you have regular blood checkups for whatever. And if they look at your bloods and find that your vitamin B level is low, it may be worth talking to them about taking supplements. So if I look at the summary of how to age well, it will be that you probably need fewer calories to maintain that weight, or you might have smaller. Make sure that the amount of food you consume, even though it might be a smaller portion, isn't low in nutrients. And that's the worry, that if you eat less, you consume less nutrients, whereas sometimes you actually need more. So you might need high levels of these nutrients, the protein, the calcium, vitamin B12, compared to younger people. And a high fiber diet is essential for good gut health. That can prevent lots of bowel-related issues, but also help with your immunity. And a vitamin D supplement is essential from October to April, or it might be that you need it all year round if you don't go out very much. So, and that's all I wanted to say. So thank you for listening.